Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, after a week of sort of taking a bit of a break from everything, I've just sort of been streaming and playing in the background and learning the game as much as I could. I think I'm at a point where I understand this game. Basically, the simplest way to get damage into anything is just gem level. If you didn't know, if your build's not sort of working, and I'm going to do a series of videos on this sort of stuff moving forwards. I know there's a lot of stuff that's sort of poking around on YouTube now. But yeah, no, I might be late to the game, but I can bring my unique perspective into things. But yeah, basically gem level is everything, including on this build. So what are we doing with this build? Well, basically this is a freezing shard build, right? We use Gallad Staff, and we basically cast with freezing shard. But we do it a little differently than what other people have done with their builds. Number one, I definitely use things like at Serious Disdain. Gives me a huge amount of survivability. If I take this off, my ES goes to 200. It'll go down to 200, as you can see down here. If I put this on, it goes up to 728, which is pretty damn good. Now, outside of this, basically we use the snake pit on this build, and I have one that is juiced up with a pretty cool corrupt. Cost me 1 div. Now, nothing on this item costs more, on this build costs more than 1 div individually, and collectively most things are like under 20 exalt, so the build's relatively affordable. I'll probably stack it at like maybe 4 or 5 div right now. That being said, yeah, no, it's pretty damn defensive. So we basically run around with approximately anywhere up to, I think, 76% evasion, something of that nature. There we go. And then basically, yeah, because of that, I don't have a lot of chaos res on the build, which I got to fix in further iterations of the build. But we have about 1700 ES and 1700 life, which is reasonably respectable. Now, we also use Tailwind on this build because this is a Deadeye caster. So we use Gathering Winds and then we use Windward. As you can see, I'm 3 Ascendancies down. And I'll do a video on how I did that really easily as well. And then basically we then throttle up as much cast speed as we can possibly fit on the build. And the way that we do that is with a number of sources that we'll talk about. But basically we're at just idle 2.3, 2.4, 2.53 casts per second at this stage. So we're going to keep juicing that up to get it over 3 and basically get it as fast as possible. One thing I realized was more cast speed and more speed equals damage. Now, mobility-wise, movement speed, we have about 41.6% movement speed, and that's with our max stacks of our Tailwind up. So we move pretty damn quickly compared to how most builds are moving right now. So our mobility is really good, which means we can get out of dodge really quickly. One of the most important things I learned about this game, and it's why things like the Warrior really fail as a class right now, is the game gets significantly easier with mobility and attack or cast speed. The faster you are, and this isn't necessarily talking about being zoom, but the faster you are, the more you're able to negotiate the game, the boss fights, and all the other stuff that's going to be thrown at you, and the easier everything gets, and that's what this build sort of achieves. So, another couple of things that we have in this build. So, from a damage standpoint, we do use Archmage. Even though we have a relatively low mana pool, we only have 1000, this still gives us a pretty significant portion of our damage. So if we look at it, 6.2 thousand per shard, and we go down to 4.1 thousand. So Archmage is pretty useful. The other thing that we do, because we do lightning damage, we do use things like Frost Bomb, and now I use Orb of Storms to then proc Shock and proc Cold. And that is basically doing a ton more damage, or allowing us to do more damage. We then buff up with Sigil of Power, which we have a weapon switch with, and we'll talk about all this. And then when we sort of switch back, we go back to Gallad Staff, and this is going to juice up your damage even further. And then we also use a little bit of Flame Wall if you want, and if you really need that damage boost, Mana Storm. And because we have no cost here, or minimal cost Mana Storm we can keep up. In a few more levels, we're going to take a few more points back up into these cast speed nodes back up here, which is going to give us more mana regeneration, and that's going to make us even more juicy on the cast speed side. That's basically how it works. And then beyond that point, we do a ton of freeze build up. We then basically freeze and shock, or we freeze and basically hit the enemies with lightning damage all around us. And this has been resulting in me clearing like T15s really easily. Generally, bosses take just a touch longer, though you can sort of get closer with this build now with the amount of evasion and everything built into it, that you can sort of face tank things from time to time as well, but you still have to be careful and mindful of those one-shots and whatnot that are coming at you. But anyway, I thought this build would just be really unique and interesting. I do have some other ideas from a melee standpoint to play on the Deadeye, basically anything with projectiles, but what I found is, like the Monk for the Invoker class and like the Sorc, the Deadeye is basically one of the best Ascendancies to run in the game right now. It's just got so much versatility with Tailwind, and it's my biggest criticism about the endgame with Path of Exile 2 right now. And I've got a video that'll be coming out finally, hopefully a little bit later today or tomorrow, which is going to talk about all the issues that I have with the endgame right now. And it's not necessarily dissimilar to what other people are saying, but right now there are many issues. Anyway, let's get into the guide. I'll also do a mobalytics page up for this, at least with the POB or the pathing tree, so you can see how I pathed it out and the gem links. And then I'll flesh that out over time as well. But yeah, anyway, let's get into the guide and talk about the build. Okay, so starting off with the gear on this character. So the goal with this is to basically build around to maximize the amount of evasion and the amount of fire, cold, and reses that we have. I don't necessarily worry about chaos res, I just basically dodge that stuff, but later down the track with more upgrades, we're going to need to worry about that. We also want to stack life, and we want to stack energy shield where we can, and as much mana as we can, and we need at least about 110 spirit on this build to make it work properly. But gearing wise, we use that Series Disdain. This is a really good item. Basically, it takes 26% of your maximum life as extra energy shield, which you can then exacerbate by basically putting like ES nodes like Inner Faith, or for example, Spectral Ward, or for example, well, even things like this have a weighting because we increase evasion and then a Spectral Ward then gives us more. But anyway, all of these things sort of contribute to a bigger ES pool at the end of the day. So basically, this is the best helm that I can think of for this. Now, it does mean some of the damage that you take, about 23% bypasses the helm or your energy shield because of this helm. And that's okay because we have 1773 HP as well. It also gives you rarity, which obviously we all know you need to run rarity in the game because it's the only way to get drops right now. Now, the Gallad staff that I run is pretty ridiculous. What I found with this build is you need to have like a minimum of like, when you get to like T10 plus 5 on the staff for cold spells, and you want to get as high a freezing shard as you can. I can only get 18. I can't find any 19s or 20s on the market, whether or not they even exist. And I got really lucky with this staff because I ended up crafting on the 53% spell damage, 142% cold damage, 200 mana, which then synchronizes with Archmage. Then we have +6 to all cold spell skills, so this brings it up to level 28, which is pretty damn high. And then we have 42% increased cast speed, and we lucked out with gain 31 mana per enemy killed, so we can sustain our mana pretty easily as well. This is a really, really difficult staff to get, but if you scour the market for long enough, you'll find one. And I think I only paid like 20 Exalt for this, so yeah, just nobody was really playing with this type of build, and that's why I made it. Now, Snake Pit. Standard Snake Pit is fine. I got one with skill speed, and basically you also notice that on the amulet I'm running, I've got an anoint for acceleration, and this is this node down here. So 3% increased movement, 10% increased skill speed overall. I would say with like almost every build I'm going to run acceleration because the quality of life you get out of mobility and speed is second to none. But going back to the Snake Pit, the reason why we need it on the left side is because we want the projectiles to fork from spells. And so basically they can't chain, but they can fork, and that just means that we have tons of projectiles, and then that synergizes with our tree, which we'll talk about soon, where we have basically ricochet, right? So projectiles have 15% chance to chain in an additional time from terrain, which isn't negated by the effect of non-chain off of the ring, fortunately. Chest piece, basically you want around 50 spirit. You also want a ton of evasion, so 1000 evasion if you can get it, a lot of life, and any other resistances you need is basically where you want to get to. Amulet, +2 to all projectile skills. This is +2 to your freezing shard because it's a projectile skill, right? And then basically a ton of evasion. We got extra intelligence, resistances. Life. This is not the best amulet, and I'm going to be looking for other upgrades. Ideally, we want +3 for projectiles to get it to level 29 on the gem level. But for now, this is good enough. If we get to level 29, we can just blast and nuke and T16s all day long. Now, the other ring, I have cast speed, about 28%, rarity, a little bit of life, some evasion. This isn't the best ring that I could have, but it's pretty good for right now. Gloves, again, rarity, resistances, life. Again, could get way better gloves, but haven't. Now, these are evasion based as well. All my gear is evasion based because evasion is quite strong in this game. Now, belt, again, life, some mana, all resistances. And then boots, 30% movement speed is significantly better than 20% in every possible way. And you might think that 10% is not significant in any way, shape, or form. It 100% is. I also have a ton of evasion, 381 evasion on this, some life, 30% rarity as well, and our lightning resistance to cap us off, and then that's basically it. Now for flasking, I'm basically using a gain charge on kill flask. This isn't BIS by any means, but it's really useful. And then we're running Golden Charm to get our rarity up even further, and then we're also running a mana flask that just keeps our mana chugging away. We get about 541 mana over 3 seconds, which often isn't enough, but I'll be looking to upgrade this over time as well. Okay, so for our gem link setup, so Sigil of Power, which we have on our weapon switch, so we have a weapon switch to a chiming staff, which gives us Sigil of Power. We have Persistence, and then we have Magnified Field. This just gives us a longer skill effect duration and also a bigger field duration. So we just basically pop that down and then keep casting, and it's nice and fast because we have tons of cast speed. Then on Freezing Shard, we have Considered Casting, Controlled Destruction, we have Arcane Tempo, and Cold Mastery. I did try Cold Pen over Cold Mastery, and Cold Mastery is significantly better because +1 to skills is way better than 30% pen, as it turns out. Now we have Flame Wall in case we need it. We can pop it down and we can shoot through and pick up flame damage on our projectiles as well. Now Frost Bomb we also have in the build, and we have Strip Away, we have Spell Cascade, and we have Cold Penetration. I should note on our Flame Wall our Fortress, and that's why it goes around the big circle. And then on Archmage, well, I've got Clarity, I've got Lightning Mastery as well, which gives us level 19 Archmage, and I've 20% of that, so we get 8% of damage as extra lightning damage, which is about like 40%, 30 to 40% of our damage pool right now. And then finally we have Orb of Storms with Conduction and Lightning Exposure, so we do Lightning Exposure, and then we do Lightning Pen, or better chance to shock, sorry. And the reason for this is we're running Archmage, so it synergizes with Lightning and Cold, and you basically just drop that on bosses and nuke them. And then finally we have Mana Tempest, which we have Premeditation, and we have Murderous Intent, and we could probably put Inspiration in this as well to get the cost down further. And we basically drop this and sit inside of this Mana Tempest when we need it to do massive levels of boss damage. But that's basically it for the skill gem setup, and this will all be in the Mobalytics link. Okay, so for the pathing tree, initially when we level this, you can level this any way you want, by the way. You could even level this with Freezing Shard. We sort of level into this Honed Instinct, and then we can take this Vile Wounds and Clean Shot early on, and then we start dissecting out or diverging out and getting these attribute points. You've got to very finely balance between intelligence and dexterity for this build because you need a combination of the two, but basically we come down up here, we come down and we get Split Shot and we get Trick Shot, which allows us to do chaining from terrain and allows us to have 75% chance for an additional projectile when forking. And because of Snake Pit, we fork basically all the time. And then basically we come across, now I did get these really good gems in here, like we get extra, this doesn't have damage, but 16% extra energy shield, life recoup, and mana regeneration. And if we can find better ones, we'll switch these out. But then you come down and you grab Bestial Skin, and then into Enhanced Reflexes, which gives you 8% increased dexterity, and this helps us get up to the dexterity amount to run the amount of evasion that we run in all of our gear. And then we come up, we grab Exposed to the Cosmos, this gives us Cold Pen, and then we'll come up and we'll grab Spectral Ward, and then these nodes up into Shadow Dancing as well, which is pretty significant. Then we'll want to come in and grab Kite Runner, and then we want to grab the projectile damage nodes as well to get as much proj damage as we can. I do have another jewel here, which does 8% lightning penetration as well, and projectiles have 3% to chance to chain an additional time from terrain. So we increased evasion. It's just a really good jewel to have in this build. Then we come back up into Harsh Winter and Thin Ice. This gives us a lot more damage against frozen enemies. We'll come back down into our Inner Faith. This gives us more ES and evasion, and then down into Echoing Frost, which is 30% increased elemental damage against enemies that you've chilled recently, which is why we blow everything up in maps. Then we come up and we grab Arcane Intensity, because we stack a bit of mana to use Arcane Cloak. Basically, we use Arcane Intensity to get 3% increased spell damage per 100 mana because we've got 1,000 mana. That's 30% increased spell damage straight away. And then we want to come up and grab Turn the Clock Forward. This gives us 20% increased projectile speed. Now, this is significant when you take this off. This is actually a big... It just feels bad without this. Then we come up and we grab Ingenuity, and we also grab Patient Barrier. This gives us increased ES and increased intelligence. Then we'll come across and grab Glaciation and Blizzard. This gives us another +1 and increased Cold Pen and Exposure effect. And then right now I'm sort of going down. I'm likely going to build in a Climate Change, which is going to give us more damage, which is gain 25% cold damage, extra fire damage against frozen enemies. So we're going to do like Trinity damage at some point. And I also consider whether or not we run Pure Power as well. Now we come across and basically we're going to take the Overzealous node, which gives us 16% increased cast speed, +3/+3. So what's that? 16 + 3, 19, 22% cast speed as well, which is pretty significant. And if we can fit any other nodes, we'd come around and grab Storm Charge. Well, we'd grab All Natural as well, but we're probably not going to have enough points to do that. But that's it for the pathing tree. Now for the Ascendancy, pretty much we want to go into Point Blank early on. Sorry, Tailwind first, then Point Blank on second Ascendancy, and then Windward, which is on the third Ascendancy. This gives us 3% less damage taken per Tailwind. We get 10 stacks, that's 30% less damage taken. And Tailwind basically gives us a ton of, if you had attack speed or cast speed. So like Deadeye right now has some of the best utility out of any of the Ascendancies from a speed standpoint and a damage reduction standpoint. And I can't see why I would play any other Ascendancy outside of this Ascendancy unless we're like Invoker or, you know, something similar of that nature, because yeah, it's just a lot of speed and a lot of damage. And then basically beyond that, we can get Endless Munitions, which is an additional projectile, which is a ton more damage on the build as well once we do the fourth Ascendancy. Now, just a thing to look out for when you're mapping, and additional like monster life is not problematic, just slows the build down. You basically want to avoid that stat on maps. And obviously chaos damage, because we don't have much chaos rares, is a big no-no. Temporal Chains is a bit of a pain as well, because this is a speed-based build. Temporal Chains just slows you down too much. I wouldn't recommend doing bosses with Temporal Chains, but outside of that, the build overall works pretty damn well. And that's about it. Really simple and easy to follow guide. I'll put the at least the skill setup and the pathing tree on the Mobalytics page for this one. And yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to post down below, or if you're running a similar build and you've got some suggestions or ideas, put it down below. I'm going to keep this running until I've basically got this blasting like, you know, pinnacle bosses at this stage, because I'm pretty confident I can do it. And I also have some other ideas around melee builds that I could potentially do with the Deadeye moving forwards, but I feel like this is my type of build style at this stage. It's taken a little while to get there. This game has been a little bit difficult to overcome in learning how builds work, but yeah, for the most, like, yeah. Anyway, all right. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like and sub to the channel, and yeah, there'll be a few more vids coming out in the next day or so, and then I'm back to work. Yeah, but anyway, we'll be back on the track with the channel, and I will see you guys then. Anyway, have a good one all, and I'll see you guys later.